Hello to all who's watching this, whether it be in class, you saw my video looking for some information on our topic, which will be about phonemes, which is just about letter sounds and understanding ways that we can add, subtract, and manipulate sounds. So a good starting place for this is because one of the main things that we learn this skill is for rhyming words and also for reading purposes is I'm just going to do a first just an activity where we access prior knowledge about rhyming words, where an activity I'll have, which I have a volunteer that will help me model this throughout the whole video, is I'm just going to have him for a minute. I'm going to set a timer, and he'll just write down as many rhyming words as he can think of, no matter what it is, just whatever he can think of, just to start this activity. So I'm going to hand him a note card, just so he can write them down and give a minute. And so, do you understand what I'm expecting out of you?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so I'm going to start the timer, and you can go whenever you're 3, 2, 1. So as he's writing it, this is important to understand, because kids will know through reading books and stuff that words do rhyme, but they don't always know why they rhyme, and so they can pick up on different things like that about adding, subtracting, and changing letter sounds or phonemes, as we say. So I'm going to let him write for, it's already been 30 seconds, so it's pretty quick. If you want to do this at home, it's a fun activity, either on a paper or a note card, anything you can write on, and do in pairs. And then once the minute's up, I'm going to have him share some and see what he came up with. Alright. So, how many rhyming words did you find, just as like pairs or a group of them?
4.
You found 4. Let's just have you read 3 of them, okay?
Okay. So one of them was bog, cog, dog, and fog.
Okay.
The other one is cat, mat, bat, and dat.
Okay.
And the other one is made, fade, paid, and raid.
Okay, that's good. I think that's about what, we would all be able to get around the minutes. 4 or 5 just different groups of rhyming words. Because that's another thing that probably is a bit confusing for smaller kids, is that we typically learn like cat and hat, or bat and cat. So a lot of people think of them in pairs, don't think of them in groups. Where when you get later on, you start to realize there are a whole group of words that do rhyme that might not have been in your vocabulary when you were actually learning it. So just some preliminary questions. Where would you see rhyming words?
In rap.
Rap, yeah. And just in form of writing, talking, reading, things like that. Rap is one as a form of poetry and music. That is a big basis of what rap is. So, what do you think make words rhyme together?
The sound.
The sounds of it?
At the end, yeah.
So, let's just take, for example, of what you wrote. You have bog and cog. So, what are like some similarities and differences between bog and cog that would make them rhyme?
Well, the similarities would be the ending in the og sound, O and G.
The OG.
Yeah, and then the differences would obviously be the first letter.
Okay, let's see if and then also I see that you have another thing you didn't mention. You said made and paid. So what's the difference in the spelling of that?
So made, obviously the M-A-D-E form, and paid being P-A-I-D are spelled not, the ending isn't similar, but they still have the same sound.
Yeah, they have similar letter sounds, even though they're spelled differently because of the effects of long and short vowels. So those let's look at some other examples, and I'll just say some pairs like we've said, bat and cat. And then, so we've already done that. So yeah, it's about like typically most rhyming words you think of, you start with changing the first letters. So bat, cat, hat. So with that, typically what we're doing is we're changing the letter sounds from the beginning. So that's one way that we can deal with phonemes and letter sounds is by changing letters. So typically a strategy where we can get young kids to start this is by just going through the alphabet, going down and changing the first letter and seeing if it does make a word. So an example of that is if we use the OG sound as our ending, we could add in an A and have AOG. Is that a typical word that you would use?
No.
What would that sound like if it was a word?
Okay,
y'all.
Yeah.
And then then we go down to B, and we've already had bog is the word you started with, and then you've already went cog, dog, and then we go down to E. Is an EOG a word?
No.
That's the same thing as the A. Fog. What about gog?
No.
I don't think it's a common word, but hog would be. And just going down the alphabet like that all the way to Z is a good way to figure out if words rhyme. Say it in your head, say it out loud. Different strategies just to re-go over it and reinforce the information that we are learning. So another way that we can do is we can add word sounds. So for that, as like an example, is if I give you, similar how I just had the last letters, I don't have the first letter. If I gave you old, the word old, that is a word on its own, but I can add phonemes, letter sounds, to the beginning of it to make also other words. So an example of this is if we added a B, I have
bold.
And if I add a C,
cold.
And if I add an F,
fold.
And I just start going to the F because I know E typically doesn't work in that situation, and D would be dulled. So the same situation about just dealing with the alphabet, which is why it's important for students at a young age learning this to be able to understand not only the alphabet and able to recite it, but understand the letter sounds that they make, and then be able to realize when they say it and read it, and also think about it cognitively, that they do have different meanings like that, where it's not just a letter, it's a letter sound and a way it looks on paper and a way you think about it in your head. It's a series of related topics and knowledge in our head that we have to connect. So then the last one would be about subtracting word sounds. So an example of this is, it's a bit more complicated because you're thinking subtracting words. It's the same thing as adding. Similar to math, if we added 2 plus 3 equals 5. Well, 5 minus 3 equals 2. So they relate to each other in that way. So if we took the example bold and we subtract the B, we get old. So just an example I've written down here is if we had spread. So what letters would we subtract to make an actual word?
The S.
The
so
S.
You just have red.
Well, spread, it's SP in it. So we take apart the S and the P, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just to have red. So that's an example of when you might need that. And this later comes into when we have the roots and the pretext and I'm blanking on what it's called, but the ending of the words that means something. So where you have like an ing. So reading, you want to take out the ing just to say read, just in different cases. That's why it's important here to solidify and master it at a young age now. So when you get into that an older age and you get these big words you need to take apart, it's important to be able to take them apart in the different ways, as I mentioned, with speaking, listening, reading.
A prefix and a suffix.
Prefix and a suffix, that's right. So they're similar, like I said, adding, subtracting, and then changing's a bit different because it's a different thing, but they're all very similar about changing the letter sounds and letters the words make. So now I have an important activity, and so what we're going to be doing is, have you heard of Mad Lib activities?
I have.
And so what I'm going to be doing is I have a Mad Lib activity that I wrote myself, and in each sentence I misspelled a word or wrote something that doesn't fit there. And so there's only one in each sentence just as a preliminary activity. You can do this at home if you have a parent or peer that you want to write your own or have them write one and then correct their mistakes. That's all we're going to be doing is I'm going to read it for you, and everywhere after I finish the sentence, I'll see if you remember, and then I'll underline the mistake that you heard, okay? So, once upon a time, there was a fairy maiden princess that lived in a very pretty castle. So, if you want to read that first, because sometimes doing those skills, so in those words, we're either adding, subtracting, or changing a letter sound.
Where it says hat.
Mm-hmm. What should it be instead of hat? Are we adding, subtracting, or changing?
We're change. We're adding.
Adding a T?
Yeah.
Because hat doesn't make sense. We know a hat goes on our head, but there we're talking about a location of in that pretty castle, right?
Yes.
Alright, so do you want to underline that? And so because that was kind of hard to hear and hit a mistake, do you want to read the second one and then also underline the mistake you see there? Do you want to read it out loud?
Yeah, sure. The fairy maiden princess loved to have sun and play in the sun.
Okay. Did you hear a mistake in there in the flow and the fluency of it?
Yes.
So what was the issue?
Oh, okay, so sun
Mm-hmm.
would obviously, you'd have to take out the S and put in an F.
So we're changing.
Yeah, we're changing sun to fun.
Because it wouldn't make sense to say sun and then the sun.
Yeah.
So we're changing this to fun, so it's the princess having fun in the sun.
Yeah.
Okay, just go ahead and underline that. You can make it an F. And if you want to read the third one to us.
But Dundee, the fairy maiden princess, was very sick and needed help from her friend that 'twas a doctor.
Mm-hmm. I guess there's multiple stakes in that one, isn't there?
Yes.
So if you just want to start at the beginning and go to the end, just making mistakes, or changing and correcting.
Okay, so, but Dundee, you would take out the D out of done, so it'd be but one day.
Mm-hmm.
The fairy maiden princess was very sick and needed help from per friend. You would change per to her,
Mm-hmm.
so take out the P and put in an H.
Mm-hmm. A lot of changing.
Yeah. That 'twas a doctor, and I guess 'twas, which is.
We would subtract a T, right? To make it was.
Oh, okay. I thought
That was a doctor.
Because back then they probably did say 'twas.
Yeah, it's a little thing I added.
Okay.
But
there you go.
you wanna, is that another sentence?
Yeah. Her friend that was a doctor, however, lived far away, and the fairy maiden princess sad no way to get to her friend. Okay.
Okay.
So her friend that was a doctor, however, lived. You would change the T to an F,
Mm-hmm.
because tar would change to far.
To far.
And you would add an I to sad,
Mm-hmm.
because the fairy maiden princess said no way.
Yeah.
To get
She
to
wasn't
her.
sad, she just was.
She
Yeah.
said something, yes. Keep going.
Yeah.
Luckily, you prince was feared by, then he could ride his horse to wet the medicine.
Do you wet medicine?
No, I don't.
No. What do we do to medicine? We get medicine.
We get medicine.
Okay.
Well, what is the U?
You want me to look at it?
It's a letter.
That might have just been a typo.
Okay.
I'll just read the next part, and if you want to answer this in the comment or in the classroom, you can. On this very song journey, the prince mad to fight off many dad guys and scar monsters to get the medicine. So in that, it's trying to say on this very long journey, instead of songs, we're going to change the S in song to L and long. The prince to fight off many bad instead of dad. That's a common mistake with writing, is they'll get little kids, young students will get B's and D's confused. So it might be common to read a child's handwriting that's not really developed, dad guy, when he's trying to say bad guy. And it's supposed to say scary, but it says scar. Monsters, because kids might not be comfortable with Y because it's a consonant, but also will makes that vowel sound in some cases to get the medicine. And last sentence, but the prince has successful in getting the princess's medicine, and raved the day for the princess was fabled to play in the sun again. So the correct sentence in that would be, but the prince was successful in getting the princess's medicine and saved the day for the princess to be able to play in the sun again. So an important thing about why this skill is important is, was that easy to read?
No, it was not.
So that's why it's important to be able to do skills like this about adding and subtracting and changing letter sounds, because it has a big part in how we read things, how we spell things, and how we say things in communication. So if we were to make all those changes, would it make a lot more sense?
Yes.
Which would go into just how it flows and the repetition of us reading it, which is the same thing about why it's important to do punctuation, which is a different topic about periods and commas. Just makes it easier for people to read it. And so that was our lesson on phonemes, letter sounds, and why it's important to learn them, and how some activities you can do to work on these skills. Once you do start getting the hang of it, this will be a lot easier to do it yourself, and also make up activities like these Mad Libs, and also in rhyming words, just picking up on it. I appreciate everyone who tuned in to watch, and everyone who's attending the classroom. I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you.